Hi, this is the Drupal usability meeting for 24th of July 2018. And we are going to look at some doc stuff, I believe. Matthew?
Yeah, okay, so I'm the only agenda item, is that right?
Yes, apparently, yes.
All right, well, let me give you a little bit of background then. I'm working as the coordinator of the documentation initiative, and apart from writing documentation, one of the goals is to improve the user experience on Drupal.org in terms of like discovering and browsing documentation. And I've been doing some work on a Drupal.org dev site and filing lots of issues and patches and things like that. But I actually only recently discovered that there was a UX group to share this with, and I was very pleased. So I'd like to just share it with you all and get some feedback. You know, I have sort of some questions in my own mind of I'm not sure how to do all of the things, but I'd also like people to give input on some of the things that I thought were good decisions. So let me share my screen. Can you all see it? Anybody?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And I'm just going to show you what the current page on Drupal.org looks like first, actually, as a reminder. So if you go to the main documentation page on Drupal.org, which you can get to from the resources and then documentation link, and actually the resources link also goes to the same place, oddly enough. It's kind of confusing. It's not clear what the difference between a Drupal 8 documentation link is and a Drupal 8 user documentation link, why that's different than developer documentation, why developer documentation is different than developer guides, and then like how random things like code snippets and troubleshooting get into the mix. So it's hard to discover things, and it's also hard once you click into one of these links to know what all of the contents are under it. So we get this huge list of guides, but if you click further into these guides, you'll find that there's even more guides under them, and then each of those guides has more pages under them, and it's like impossible to get a sense of the overall information architecture. So I've been doing a little bit of work on that. So here's a dev site. It's like a fork of Drupal.org that the DA helped me create for the doc initiative. And this is me logging in like as user one, as Dries, and changing all of the panels around, changing some theming things, creating new types of blocks, installing modules, patching them, all sorts of stuff. But a few things to call out that are different about this are, one, you land and we're giving some instruction on how you could actually get started and where you should go, since there's no direction given in the existing page. So for instance, for getting started, there's two categories. Do you want to click through a Drupal demo site, or are you ready to start building a site? And if you want to do a demo site, there's the Try Drupal program. I'm also assuming this will go live after 8.6 does, so there is the ability to use the new Quick Start command. So there's a guide that would show you how to do that. And if you're building a new site, you can go to a getting started guide, or jump right into the user guide if you're ready to start customizing. So I think it's great to give direction. As you scroll further down, there's a delineation between what I'm calling official guides, which are guides that actually have governance and version control and published standards for how they are drafted, versus community guides, which are just nodes that anybody can click and change, and they're not really governed. There's technically owners of them that can go in and change them, but anyone is able to edit them without any editorial process. Additionally, these are separated. We also get a preview of what's under them. So this is a custom block that I modified on the Drupal.org code base so that as you browse through these things, the developer guide, for instance, you can get a sense of what's in it. The APIs guide, you can get a sense of what's in it. And I've got another section here for another kind of documentation that's actually API'd at Drupal.org. It's not written content, it's automatically generated stuff. So that's one big UX change. I think I'm going to finish talking about what's on this page, and then I'll click into other pages after I get feedback. So the last things to talk about on this are there's a new menu here. So you actually get a sense of what's on this page and how it's organized from official community and API reference. And this is just Drupal 8 docs. There's actually a different tab, and this might be a controversial thing, but I would love to have one page that's just for Drupal 8 and one page that's just for Drupal 7. One of the existing challenges is when you try to mush together lots of different major version docs onto one page, it's really hard to do the layout. I'm not married to tabs as the way to do that, but right now the Drupal 7 docs are on a separate tab that looks very similar. Lastly, there's some changes in here where each of these headings automatically gets an anchor generated for it. So I can do things like click this, and I actually get an on-page link that drops me down, and I can jump to a section. And I'm trying to put that everywhere. So we get automatically generated anchors that are semantically named, and you can link to those in various places. The other stuff is actually mostly already on the existing site. So there's already a Drupal books thing that I assume we have to keep around because we build revenue from it, and some information on how to contribute. So I'll stop talking now before moving forward. Does anyone have any thoughts on the user experience of this main documentation landing page?
Yeah, I was also disappointed when the current system was rolled out to see that you only ever get one level of the document hierarchy. And I agree that that makes it hard to get a picture of the overall structure. Let me just mention on the community guide, since I maintain one of them, that although anyone can edit them, only those of us who have been patted on the head by the appropriate people are able to change their inner menus. So yes, there's some level of curation there, although not nearly as much as there is for the official guides. I wonder that block at the top, is that available everywhere on child pages of this, or does that only appear on this page?
Are you referring to the D8 menu block?
Yes, that block.
So that is a great question. It's actually one of the questions I wanted to pose to this group is where should this appear? So let's click into like the Drupal 8 community guide here. I can change the default panelizer content for new documentation guides such that all new ones would include this, and anything that's using the default one would include it. So you can see, yes, as I clicked into Drupal 8, well, actually it's not there. I have it on some of them and not others because I haven't done it the default. So it's not right. No, that is it, but the title changed. Oh, that's weird. That would be something to fix. So it's here, but it's called documentation instead of Drupal 8 docs. And the question is, like, should we keep that at every level? What if, because there's a lot of levels and it starts to get crowded. So if I click down another level, here I am at understanding Drupal version numbers. Here are all of the sibling things under it. And we could drop the menu for D8 docs here, but it's just going to get pushed way down. You can click on this, though, in the breadcrumb to get back to the parent guide, or you can click on documentation here to get back to the first landing page. So there are elements in play so that we can let us backtrack.
Right. Oh yeah, one more thing on the page we were looking at, the top Drupal 8 page, is that the API documentation sort of gets lost at the very bottom of the page. And I guess there's this principle that the thing people remember most is the beginning of the list and the end of the list, but I think that only applies if they get to the end of the list. So I think I would want to have the, is this what we were looking at?
No, I thought you were referring to this page, but I realize now you're referring to yet another page up. So,
right.
So you were talking about this API reference section at the very bottom.
Yeah, and that just seems to me that it's going to get lost underneath all of the contributed guides.
Yeah, there is a link to it here, but we could maybe make it more obvious somehow. I don't know. I I wanted people to encounter getting started and official guides before they encountered anything else, because I know in my own experience, I got lost in the community guides before discovering the official stuff and then didn't understand the difference. So we could maybe do something in the sidebar here by either making API reference stand out more or having another block to kind of like more of a call out, like, hey, were you looking for API docs?
How about putting the API docs between the official guides and the community guides?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. They won't find community guides quite as easily then, but.
Well, API guides is half a screen height.
Yeah, and I haven't included all of them. I kind of just included what I thought were the most important community guides, the Drupal 8 guide, the developer guide, and then confusingly, there's an APIs guide, which is, they're guides about APIs, but they're not the actual API docs.
All right.
Okay, noted. Moving this up and making it more prominent would be good.
I mean, I'll just throw out there when you bring up the API reference that I could see it in the right-hand column. Like, it's not something that you need to tell people it's there, but you don't need to give them too much information about, like, here's our API documentation. And I could almost see it on the right-hand column before contribute. Small, not as big as it is at the bottom. Because it's different. It's not written you know what I mean? It's automatically generated documentation, which is different than the official guides and the unofficial guides and the API reference. It's different a different type of content.
Yeah, I buy that. You know, having a separate block in between D8 docs and contribute to say, are you interested in an API reference? Click here.
And you could take it out of the D8 doc like that. Then you don't have to have that shortcut that says API references in the D8 docs, and it goes to a different site.
Yes.
So that helps.
Yeah. So breaking it out of here entirely. Yeah.
So I don't know if we have any designers on the call right now, and I don't know if it's permitted, but I find one of the hardest things about these pages is it's so much white space and so many lists. And I don't know if there might be some visual and accessibility cues that can be added to each section to help it seem different. So like getting started is a section, the official guides are a section. It's hard to note that with the way it looks right now. And I don't know how it would be for someone with a different mode of viewing the page.
Yeah, I'm open to suggestions for that. I added in these horizontal rules here, or these borders. To try to denote that, because I see the same problem. But I'm not a designer, so that was my really innovative, creative idea, is to put in horizontal lines.
So I assume those titles, getting started, and official guides, those are H2s?
Those should be H2s.
So
yeah, H2s.
Yeah, as long as the semantic markup is correct, I think that's pretty good for accessibility. You could add a little bit of zebra striping so that when you move from the getting started list to the official guides to the contributed guides, there's more of a sense of transition than just having the horizontal rule.
I'd worry a little bit that we're already kind of using this dark gray to call something out. And if I use like dark gray also for zebra striping on the left, it might just start to look kind of crazy. Do we have designers? Is there a process for this? I don't know who I'd even go to get designs. I've sort of honestly had trouble getting people involved and just started doing work on my own.
Yeah, I think this design was designed by Emily earlier, and then she left the DA, and I don't think the DA has designers anymore that would design something for Drupal.org, and I don't think that anybody else attempted to design. I mean, Jacob was using a lot of creative stuff from the style sheets to build out the web form project page. He found all the hidden features of Drupal.org.
Yeah, I've had that wondrous journey myself. So, all right, well, I'll sort of put a pin in that and take some notes that we talked about making API reference more prominent and also finding.
So
about
with the
good ways.
personally say I don't love the try. I'm just like buttons. I mean, I just want to be clear. Like for getting started, a try Drupal button, it makes a lot of like if we want to do call to actions in each one of these, like getting started would be try Drupal, and the official guides it might be what is Drupal, and have a button, and that will just at least guide people to quickly. You don't have to read the information if you have a large a green button calling it out. It might be too much, but
I'm happy to experiment with that too. For the try Drupal, like I don't actually like the page you go to, so I don't want people.
I don't either. But the concept is sound. If that makes any sense, you know what I mean? Like,
I mean, it's if you look at this text, it's a demonstration of Drupal in 20 minutes or less. 20 minutes is a really long time, and I ran through these, and it takes about 20 minutes to set up a site on this, which is disincentivizing. Whereas you can take maybe less than 5 minutes to do the Drupal demo on your own machine with Quick Start. So I worry about getting into which things should be buttons and which things should not. I know I have my opinion, and that's
I do too. I agree with you. And the try Drupal agreement only for a year, so it's going to it's got another 6 months or something. And I'm speaking out of like just information I got from DrupalCon that we can revisit that in a year or so. I mean, maybe we should create a Drupal demo site button, how to build the Drupal site locally button, and that's fine too. I mean, I feel like if we feel that takes 5 minutes and it's shorter, it's a good starting point for people.
Okay. I like it.
You should experiment with it. I mean, it's a big root. If you can get Drupal running locally, that's like the big win for anyone.
Yeah. Well, let's actually click into that, and I'd like to show you all a couple more UX things that I'm working on that are a little bit more UX oriented than just documentation. So the first thing is I added these. I'm open to moving these to the right-hand side or changing the styling. This took actually a good while to figure out how to do. So there are there's this new field formatter for documentation pages that will scan through the HTML, identify selectors that we want as automatically anchored. And in this case, it's H2, 3, and 4s. And add an anchor automatically that is semantic. So you can click on it, first of all, and then your URL and your address bar can just be copy and pasted somewhere else. But also, there's an automatically generated table of contents based on the header structure of the node, so that I can just click download Drupal and pop down to that header. And this would be added to all documentation pages automatically, and they'd all get generated, and the menu would be generated as well. So that's something that I personally find very useful. It's yet another thing in the sidebar. So we've got table of contents, we've got official guides, which is the parent guide of this. And then if we had the Drupal 8 docs menu, that would be another menu under this, where I started to get kind of nervous about adding so many things to the sidebar. Another change here is these tooltips. This is a new kind of styling and markup template that I added to the WYSIWYG, so that I can do things like call out, hey, you're on a guide that's for making a demo site. Are you sure you didn't want to try Drupal online or try the Getting Started guide to actually build a Drupal app instead of a throwaway demo app? So that's kind of the use with this that can be used anywhere once we merge these. Any thoughts on that?
It looks great. I mean, I like the table of contents. In the container, the blue container, I mean, if you want to make me happy, I'd love if there were three, like the 4 containers, the warning, the error, the info, it's like the red, orange, green, and blue containers, because it just helps in documentation to have those available just in case. You don't want to use them too much. And the accessibility is really good because there's no background on that. It's very easy for someone to read the text. And the other containers they have, Matt, which I think you've seen, have those backgrounds, which create a whole accessibility issue.
I took those away because I just didn't like them. that's why I took the background out. But yeah, there is an error and a warning one too. I know. I'm waiting for this to load so we can look at it. I didn't know about this button, but it's part of the WYSIWYG. I think it's this one. So I got to work on the thumbnail for this, but this is the one I made. Tip. There's warning note. I guess these are weird version specific note, which is used in a few places, but it's really just a way for people to get a dark blue note in, and then core issue and core task template. So yeah, I would love if tip, warning. I don't know about red is like a little scary, but I would like another one in addition to tip that, you know, was maybe green or something that's that we can use for like calling out other references.
Well, I'm just basing it off that, you know, the pattern that people are using for messages. Like if you look at the Bootstrap theme, I think it's info, warning, error, and status are the three.
Yeah, I was going to pop open Symfony documentation and see if I can find some examples of how they use similar things. So for instance, here's a call out about going to a different site, hence the arrow for video tutorials. Here's sort of more of a tooltip, which like, did you know, light bulb call out to give you a little extra information on what they're doing. And I find these really useful as I go through their documentation. They use them in a bunch of places. I also really want to change the way that our embedded code looks. Like this is great to me, not just because it's high contrast and colored, so I can see the difference in comments and commands, but I can copy this and it doesn't include the dollar signs, and I can paste it right on my command line. Whereas if I come over here, this is like unreadable. And when I copy it, it copies the dollar sign too. So I get all screwed up if I try to do multi-line commands. So I started working on that and then got very annoyed because I realized we were already patching the JavaScript library that does this syntax highlighting. So it's really a messy process of trying to improve it. All right, anyone else for this? I'm pleased that it's well received. I was worried this looked a little hairy.
I think it's a great improvement. For me, the only thing is it would be nice if there were some types of cues that helped you know when you were within a particular area. So like if you're in an official guide, something that branded all the official guides so that you would know just looking at it that you are in the official guides. I find that
what about this right here?
I tend to miss those at the top because everything is blue. When everything is the same color and there's not a strong contrast, I don't know. I see a lot of white space, and I don't know if that's me specific. Going through things, it's just easy to kind of get lost and not realize you've transitioned between one type of guide and another type of information. And that's the only thing is trying to make it just really visible where you are. Like maybe if that was orange, so official guides were orange, and then you had some sort of cue, and then unofficial, the community guides, slightly different color.
Yeah.
It's just that official and unofficial, you have to literally read and note that rather than queuing off of something more immediate.
I like that. I don't know what to do from a design standpoint. I don't love Drupal.org's white spaciness either. I kind of struggled with that as I made this, and also with the breadcrumb.
Looking at your, I'm sorry, are you done?
Go ahead. Yeah, I'm done.
Yeah, looking at your navigation in the right sidebar. So I guess the official guides and that little block is already there on Drupal.org, isn't it?
Yes.
And that sort of duplicates what's at the top of the page, the breadcrumb for official guide and then the page title. But also, the table of contents is for this page. And I'd like to somehow see these two bits of navigation integrated so that it's a little more clear that the table of contents applies to what's in that little arrow highlight evaluator guide in the other block.
Yeah.
Maybe we need a designer.
I struggled with how to, and I don't think that I've solved it, how to deal with multiple levels of the information architecture represented so that you can orient yourself. And it really becomes a problem with these deeper guides. So I just clicked into the Drupal 8 user guide, or not user guide, Drupal 8 guide, weird, confusingly named. Now I'm going to click into the Drupal 8's APIs guide. And you can see where Drupal 8 is here, and you can see sibling things here.
Right.
And then you can see the content of this guide here. And let me click one more level in.
In other words, the children.
The children. Now I've lost something interesting. I'm in the cache API. I don't have information about the aunts and uncles, I guess you'd say, to this, the siblings of the parent of this. And I've also lost, except for this link up here, which isn't even obviously linking to a guide, any reference to the fact that I'm in a Drupal 8 guide at all. So that is a problem that needs to be solved. So we have all these different levels. We have the parent guide, and possibly infinite number of intermediary like parents between the top level parent and the child. We've got siblings of the current, and then we've got the table of contents for the current. So that's an open question that I'm posing. I don't know what to do about all of that, but I don't think it's working, what we're doing right now.
What about turning the breadcrumbs into drop-down menus?
Sounds hard.
Sounds ugly, but possibly useful.
It's a lot of data. Those links, you could be 100 things in each one of those drop-downs. Because go up one level, it's like the 40 things in the right-hand navigation. It's heavy.
Yeah.
That whole list would be there, yeah. I mean, searches, by the way. Yeah.
Could can you scroll down to the bottom of this page and the child of this page that you clicked on?
If I scroll into the bottom of this page, just kind of end with the children.
Okay. And the next, and the child that we were just looking at, if you could do the same thing.
Go forward, and I'll scroll down.
So one of the problems I've had, and I don't know if the bottom of the page is where to put it, but something that makes it really hard to use Drupal.org's current documentation is every page seems to exist in isolation. So you look to the right and you see this sea of siblings and maybe parents and other things you don't necessarily know. But there isn't a sense of forward and backward. There isn't a what is the precedent to this page and what is, I guess, the antecedent to this page, like what's going to come before and after. But there's an implication in a lot of instances that there is a relationship of like 1, 2, 3, 4 when you actually look at the list of siblings.
Yeah, I mean, I know they used to use the book module and they had reasons for moving away from it and moved to this structure, which is using organic groups that are not, there's not a strict implication of a backward and next. And I don't like that either. We could use, I think there's like a module called Flippy that lets you create previous and next using custom callbacks that I could like use the menu here. This is the organic group menu on the right, and just fetch the contents and show previous and next. So we could solve that problem without changing the data structure at all. I here would love to know this information. So I would love in the right-hand sidebar to know the breadcrumb trail personally, because I might not even be looking at this or know this is here, and I have no idea that Cache API is actually a child of Drupal APIs, which is a child of Drupal 8. Now, I think it would get crowded if we added that all here, but I would like all of the hierarchy represented to some degree in each place that we represent the hierarchy. And I don't know if you guys have ideas about that, but It's rough.
I agree, and I like the idea that you mentioned. I guess using Flippy. My question about using Flippy, is it possible to make it something that where you could configure what the relationships were? Because it seems like we've had an all or nothing scenario. It was either books module, which is just a nightmare, or this organic groups approach where there's a total dissociation between each grouping of information. I think that because you have that total dissociation, it would encourage people to put every piece of information on a single page, which makes scrolling through it even more difficult. So the pages, anchors, like, is there an anchor menu for the page itself? So the cacheability metadata, I don't even see it. It is the cache API over there. No,
Well, so like that, what I'm saying, the table of contents is a list of the headers on the current page in the node body.
Okay, so that's what the table of contents are. Oh, it's just not clear that those are linkable as well because of the color.
Yeah, and I can change that too. I think I was following the established style here. And it looks kind of ugly when you underline it. So I don't know how we'd make that clear without making it ugly.
Right. I don't have an answer for that, but it would. It doesn't seem to be capturing all of the information on that page. Is it because you only chose cacheability and practical as?
Well, it's just because of it's the lack of use of headers in the content. People, I mean, it'd be nice if, for instance, maybe not render caching. If this was an H3, it would show up here, but it's just bold text, and this is only listing headers.
Got it. So it's the user's guide, the content creator guide.
Yeah, it's up to them.
Yeah,
which is good in a lot of ways.
Do we have? Is that guide simple and short enough that people are using it, or is that something that it may exist but no content generators are actually following it?
Who knows? I don't know. There is also, I have another issue open that describes a problem that we have this huge sprawl of pages, and it's kind of the opposite of the problem you were worried about. Like, this is a guide and it has one page in it. And this is a guide with one page. And some of them have more, but it's pretty common to have guides with only a single page, which seems like overly complex information architecture. And when we drop into like the Drupal 8 guide, you can see it becomes really ridiculous. There's an understanding Drupal 8 guide that has one page and the page is an overview, and there's nothing else. Then we have things like understanding Drupal version numbers, and like,
which is much harder than understanding Drupal itself.
Yeah, or like you look at this. This is a page. Which version of Drupal should I install? And it's got 2, arguably 3 paragraphs. It doesn't really warrant having a page, in my opinion. And then you just have tons and tons of pages, and a lot of them barely have any information, and some of them don't even have a full paragraph. So you get these huge lists of things and can't find anything. So part of the problem is just the IA, and I don't know how I'm ever going to tackle that. It's just like overwhelming as I look at it.
Well, but the table of contents is helping a huge amount, Matt. That's like a huge step in the right direction. I just cannot emphasize, because then it gets people to try to build one large page. Like, they start with structuring their data in an outline in one page, and if it then reaches that point where they need to break it down, they will, and the talk is going to make a huge difference.
Yeah, so that's how I felt. The fact that we've got a UX that exposes the fact that it's a bad IA is good, because before that, you didn't even know what the information architecture was, let alone if it was good or bad.
So that opens the question. You've created the official guides and then distinction of the community guides. Would it make sense to have a stricter editorial process around what is deemed official, and to actually have goals for the IA where some group of individuals got together once a month and just said, okay, these are the changes we want to make to improve the IA, because it would seem to me that just waiting for people to solve the problem holistically means that everybody's scratching whatever is itching them. And that's not a recipe for good IA.
Yeah. Well, my feeling was, in terms of what I can achieve, I don't think I can achieve fixing the information architecture of the community guides, because it's a ton of work and not a lot of people want to do it. I feel like it's just me. So my idea was, let's take this distinction of official guides and make some new ones, and the new content will be subject to a strict editorial process and standards. And the Drupal 8 user guide already fits that bill. And for some of the other guides that I'd like to do, like I have like a getting started guide, and I'm going to have I'm calling it an evaluator guide right now, but I want to change it to like something that's more clear what it means. It's really how to demo Drupal, or how to click through a Drupal demo guide. And then I want like a composer guide, a config management guide, but those will be version controlled. They will have a maintainer who has to review and choose to commit things. It will have a lot of tools around them, and they're going to use a similar tool set that the Drupal 8 user guide does. That is achievable because it's a finite set of things that we're starting with and assigning owners to one at a time. So that's my tentative plan.
That matches exactly what I was trying to ask for, so that's perfect.
Yeah, and if you want to write any of it, let me know.
So the other thing you can do is, put on your official looking hat and go to the people who maintain the various contributed guides. I'm one of them, and say, hey, I'm the initiative lead for the documentation initiative, and I've been reviewing the information architecture, and your guide has too many pages, or your guide has too few pages, and can we do something about this? And the people who maintain the guides are the ones who have the permission, as I said at the start, to change the list of pages in their guide. And probably a lot of us will be happy to rearrange things with just a little bit of nudging.
Yeah, I just need help doing that. There's a lot of guides. I did try that. I sent about 8 emails out through the contact forums on Drupal.org and got 0 responses.
I hope I'm not one of them, but I may be.
You're not, I don't think. And so what I have as a contingency plan is I've figured out how to, there's like one owner essentially of the whole Drupal 8 guide who has editorial access for everything under it. And I created some issues to propose some rules for things like a guide must have at least 3 child pages, or else it needs to be removed or rolled into other content, or each page must have a minimum of 500 words, or else it has to be rolled into something else. And those are now part of the documentation standards. And so we can go through and simply make changes if they're not compliant with standards. And I think that might be a more successful way to go. But, I'll be honest, I think I'm good at recognizing problems and I'm good at fixing problems. I'm not a great person coordinator for community things. I'm inexperienced with it, but it's also not what I love doing. So I would love assistance with that if anyone's interested. But not a lot of people have the time.
I'm afraid that's true.
All right, so I think that might be all of the user experience changes that I have implemented. This is spread across a lot of issues that are all tagged with the documentation initiative tag. And there's about 5 issues pending review. And it's a kind of painful process trying to get this stuff onto D.O. I would love to get this stuff in before DrupalCon Europe. I will take your feedback and make note of it and try to work on it. I'm going to try to continue pushing through what is already here without making changes, but work on changes in parallel, just so that we can get things merged. It seems like we have enough support in this group for that.
Yeah, you say there are issues. What issue key would they be in?
So if you go to the strategic initiatives page for the documentation initiative,
Okay.
I've got some links in here. I think one of the links is going to be, view full list of issues. So this just brings up a list of issues that are tagged with the documentation initiative tag.
Okay.
The ones that are need review are pretty much all customizations to Drupal.org to support this. And once we get those merged in, then there's going to be, sadly, a lot of copying and pasting out of panel panes into Drupal.org. That's just the way it is. But that's how we'll get things live. There's also issues in here that are not UX related. That are about just creating the standards or creating the content. So that is, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Somehow. Okay. Actually, I don't see a button to stop sharing my screen.
Oh, it's over to the left, I think. Yeah.
Is that it?
Yep.
All right. Any other thoughts? What are you all working on? Is anyone doing any Drupal.org UX work other than this?
I don't know.
No.
No, not us.
I'll tell you another thing that I think needs to be done, which I might hit later. But if you all have opinions, I'd love your support here or in issue queues. I think the process of getting from the homepage to a place that you download Drupal and understand how to install it is really hard. So I've worked on the click path, assuming that people are already at a documentation landing page. But when you get to the Drupal.org homepage, there's that Try Drupal button. And the process of going from there to having Drupal installed or even finding the documentation page is just awful. So you click on it, then you go to a small link to the Getting Started page, then you go to a link for downloading Drupal 854, then you go to a link for downloading the tarball, then you go to a link for the documentation. I submitted a patch to make it so at least there's one button. We combined the download tar button with the download Drupal 854. So there's just a download tar button that automatically downloads the latest thing rather than having a different 854, 855 button. I also want to combine the Try Drupal and download Drupal pages so that you land on a page and there's just two sections of it. Try a demo online or download it. And you should see both of them after you click the big green button. How do you all feel about combining those things?
I like the idea. I don't know what our contractual obligation is regarding Try Drupal.
Yeah, I'm under the impression that Try Drupal is a contractual obligation for a while. I mean, and personally, I'm for pushing Simply Test Me because that's the best way to get people oriented with, that's a quick way to get a Drupal instance, and that's how they test patches. But yeah, Try Drupal can't really change that page. I mean, that's the impression I have. You could ask Neil Drum would know. It's probably a 1 year. I recall it being a 1 year contract right around DrupalCon.
And you think we can't even touch the page until then?
No, and it's a major contract. It pays 3 salaries. I mean, they were honest about it. They said we had to do this. It pays 3 DA staff members for a year.
Yeah. I think there's a way to do it so they can still have a good conversion, but I guess that's risky. I mean, if you look at, I just dropped a link in the Hangout chat to Contao where you land and there's two orange buttons, online demo or download. There's actually no download the code button on the Drupal.org homepage anymore. There used to be a get the code button. That's not even there. Do you think that conversion would really fall off if we had these two buttons side by side?
I don't think it'll fall off. I just think like it's hard to get the agreement to shift around. Like, I mean, I think they're going to want to reassess it and get better conversion off what they have now, because like they can't be getting great. Can it be really getting great conversion if it takes 20 minutes?
I don't know what it takes for them to get paid, clicking the link or getting it installed. So they might get paid even if the person gives up halfway through the process.
Well, it's a fixed amount. Like it's just like Acquia, Pantheon, and one-on-one have to decide what's the best approach for them. And I think I'm 100% on. It should be Simply Test Me, and then when you have a successful Simply Test Me, it should have a link to like install this on Pantheon, Acquia, or one-on-one. Like that's like just the quickest way to get people started and to get them to convert over to those services. But that's a whole crazy can of worms.
Yeah, no, I actually brought that up myself a few months ago. I was told about the contract for the try Drupal and gave up on it. But there's some concerns with Simply Test Me also with capacity. Like if we sent a bunch of traffic there, like I don't know who maintains it, but that's a big burden to put on a free service.
I know. That was recently taken over by Adam Bernstein.
Yeah. And he's open and you'd have to talk to him to see what his feelings are about increasing capacity and getting more support for it.
Yeah, it's a better experience than any of the three other providers for sure.
I remember when the Try Drupal program started, the person who built Simply Test Me said, "Yeah, hey guys, can you add me to the page? I'll jump through whatever hoops you want. I'll make the environments last for 24 hours instead of 3 hours." And but you know, he didn't have money to give the Drupal Association, so it didn't happen. That might be related to why he decided to give it up and pass it on to someone else.
Despite the fact that the contract exists, would it still be wise to open up the discussion, even if it was for what to do in a year?
Maybe in an issue where we could have multiple people agreeing, just so that someone could look and say, hey, people give a shit about this and there's some consensus. Yeah, I think that's valuable.
And maybe if a solution could be recommended, even if it's like a screenshot of those two buttons or a description of how you would envision it, because at the very least, then that is a starting point for the discussion, and then people can respond to that and say yes, no, or here's a better idea. To be more like, if everyone just says yes, there's a problem, but there's not a good discussion around how to fix it, I could see interest falling off. Whereas if it focused on how it could improve things for Drupal conversion to Drupal, as well as conversion to these sponsors, and described how that was anticipated to improve both of those things, I think then you might be able to get across the board interest rather than it spinning your wheels.
Yeah. All right. I'll open up an issue. And maybe I can come to the next UX meeting and share it with you all, and you can weigh in. So I think we're pretty much at time here, and that seems like a good amount of stuff to cover.
I was just trying to replicate how do you click through from the home page to download Drupal. It looks like it's even harder to download Drupal 7 than it is to download Drupal 8, starting from the home page.
Well, that makes sense.
But like really hard.
It's really hard to find Drupal on Drupal.org, in my opinion. And it's like, it's not just hard, it's scary. Because when you finally get to the release page, you're like, oh my God, what are all these notes and like warnings and file types? I don't know what's going on. yeah, so we'll work on that. All right, Gabor, I'm done. I don't know if you have any formal way of closing the meeting.
We haven't seen any other topics raised in the meantime, so if there is none, and we're close to being out of time, then this is what we have.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining and lending your opinions. I appreciate it, and I'm gonna push forward, try to get this stuff on Drupal.org.
Great.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks. See ya.
Thanks.
Thank you. Goodbye.